Welcome back to the show, everybody. On today's episode, we're going to be talking with Stephanie Manka. She is a fellow podcaster. She has a podcast called The Fancy Scientist, and she's here to talk about her career and how you can get a better career, not only in ocean conservation, but maybe even in wildlife conservation. We're going to talk to Stephanie on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And on today's episode, we've got a great one for you folks. We've got Stephanie Manka, who is a fellow podcaster from the Fancy Scientist podcast. And she is just bringing the heat with career advice, how she built her career, how she went from academia over to her own company, and how she is helping people get careers in wildlife conservation. That's including ocean conservation. So it's a lot of, what you can do to better your resume, what you can do to build up your mindset and get right in the right mode to build your wildlife conservation career, and even what to do within wildlife conservation. She goes into all of that in this episode. She also talks about her time on TV. She does a couple different shows around with the History Channel, really reacting to videos that may have a questionable kind of thing about the science and conservation and wildlife. So it's a lot of fun-filled, packed information here with Stephanie Manka from the Fancy Scientist podcast, and you can go to her website. I'll put the website in the show notes, as well as her podcast, so you can check it out. But here's the interview with Stephanie. Enjoy, and I will talk to you after. Hey, Stephanie, welcome to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Are you ready to talk about science communication?
Yes, I am. 100%. So excited for this.
Wonderful. This has been a long time coming, apparently, because I think we realized that neither of us have been on each other's podcast, and we're like, why hasn't that been? We've had the podcast for quite a long time, each of us. Probably some of the longest running podcasts, I think, in biology, I would say. But this is going to be fun. We're going to be talking about your career and how you ended up where you ended up as a science communicator, having your own podcast, but also having your own business, a full-time business, which is interesting in itself because not a lot of people could do that. And so I'm going to start to prod about how you can do that, so I can learn how to do that as well. But also, I think for a lot of people who are in the business of wildlife biology or ocean biology or marine biology or what have you, some people need to do that on their own, and because it's hard to fit in to some of the places and move and everything like that, depending on what we have going on in our life. So I'm looking forward to getting into all that. But Stephanie, if you could just introduce yourself to the audience if they don't know you, and just let us know who you are and what you do.
Sure. I am Stephanie Manka. I used to be Shuttler. So if you hear about Stephanie Shuttler, that's me too. That was my married name. And I am a wildlife biologist, science communicator, career mentor. Like you said, I have my own business now, but I started out in this career as a traditional wildlife biologist going down the research route.
Unreal. And that is quite a tale, I assume, going from research to where you are now and having your own business and going to science communication. I guess the first question is to start off really is, did you ever expect to have this sort of path, like this career path when you first started?
No, not at all. So my father is actually a business owner, and as a child, I would watch him come home from work, and he always carried the business with him. Now, he was an excellent father. We spent lots of time together and everything. But, there were definitely days where he was late to dinner because he had to stay with a diamond customer. He's a jeweler. Okay. And even on the weekends, he'd be talking about business, and he just always carried this on him. So I remember thinking I don't want a job like that. I want to separate work. So you can already see where this is going. I want to separate work with life. But okay, I'll try to keep this a little bit shorter. But
this is a podcast. This is where you get
I'll tell you guys everything. I basically didn't know what I wanted to do for really college. I was still confused, and my brother went to NYU for acting school, and I don't know, I just thought that was cool. I was like, oh, I'll be an actor. That sounds like a fun job, but I was also really scared of it. It's, really risky. You hear about people never making it. People have to like wait tables and they do their plays at night and everything. So I also, at the same time, decided to major in biology, and that would be my backup career. I could be a medical doctor. Right. And I did always like biology, especially the ecology stuff, but I never really knew there was a career that you could have with ecology or wildlife. I knew about Jane Goodall, but I was like, I'm not going to move to Tanzania in the middle of the forest and just live amongst chimpanzees. Like, I didn't know, even if I wanted to, I didn't know like how you would do that. Yeah. So I studied biology as a backup career to be a doctor because that seemed like a safe career. I could make lots of money. There's always doctors. And so that was my plan, but I still wanted to be an actress. And then also I realized my brother had a big influence on me. He also recommended I study abroad, just like kind of nonchalantly. He's like, oh yeah, that'd be a cool experience for you. And I didn't go away to college, so I felt like I was missing out on getting an experience. I lived with my parents and I commuted. Right. So I thought that sounded really great. I was like, okay, I'll do that. And I went to the study abroad office, and at that time there were brochures because we had the internet, but it wasn't like how it is today. And I looked at all these different brochures. I gathered the ones for theater, and those were all in Europe. And then I think I found two that were related to nature. One was in Africa, and one I think was I think it was Turks and Caicos, but I don't remember. But it was ocean related.
Yep.
And I remember spreading all the brochures on my bed and looking at them. And the theater ones, I don't know, it just didn't seem as interesting. Like learning about like ancient Greek plays and stuff didn't excite me as much. And I was a traveler growing up, even though my family didn't travel. I got this student exchange, or it wasn't an exchange, but a student ambassador program to Australia. And I did that. So I went to Australia when I was like by myself, technically. I mean, I went as a part of a group, but I didn't go with my family. So I did that. And the one for Kenya was especially calling my name because I just felt like, when am I ever going to have a chance to go to Africa again? That seems really scary. Like nobody in my family wanted to go to Africa. Like, it's not like, I don't know, I couldn't imagine myself going there. So I was like, I'm just going to do that. And it was a study for wildlife management program. Oh, cool. So it took me going all the way to Africa to realize like, oh, I can have a job in wildlife biology. I didn't realize that. So I just did the summer program. It was short, a month, but it introduced me into this world. And then when I came back, I went to a local state school. So it wasn't the best for wildlife, but I connected with the science professors and ecology professors there, and I knew you had to go to graduate school. And I now had the route of like, okay, how do I become a wildlife biologist? Mm-hmm. So then I was on my way, and I did a couple of internships, and then I went to graduate school. I got my PhD. I did some postdoc work. I had two postdocs. One was really short after I did my PhD at the same university that I graduated. And then, to be honest, I really didn't want to move again. I had moved a bunch, and I got married. I'm a big animal lover, so I accidentally rescued like 6 animals.
Accidentally. Now these were like domesticated animals. Like dogs and cats.
2 dogs and 4 cats. The last one really was an accident. Like I really didn't want her, but she was semi-feral and there was no shelter room, so they would have put her down. So my lab, my undergrads that were working for me, they convinced me to keep her. So
it's tough not to keep too, like, especially once you become an animal lover and you have multiple pets, then it's like, I can take this one in. Like
I know.
I can figure it out. You know, it's really
and especially
difficult.
when you have a house, you have no restrictions.
Oh yeah. Oh, 100%. I have to stay away from some of those Facebook accounts that are like shelters, because I'm like, I'll take all of them. Yes, like you need help, yeah, I'll take you. And I can't do that. I can't hold every one of these pets.
My boyfriend now didn't grow up with any pets, and he has one dog. We live separately. He has one dog. I have 2 dogs and 2 cats. And I'm slowly trying to convince him that like this is normal to have like multiple animals, but he's so against it. But I show him those Facebook posts. I'm like, see, this is how you get them. You feel bad for the animals.
That's exactly it. And once you have a wildlife degree, then it makes it easier.
Yeah.
Like I know how to handle this. So let me ask you this: like, so with the PhD, with the postdocs. Was it more of a focus like working directly with animals, or was it more of like a conservation focus, like, you know, almost like policy focused, or like protected area planning or things like that? Like what was it?
So I did my PhD in on forest elephants in animal behavior and using non-invasive genetics. So my focus was always like research focused. But I wanted a conservation application.
Right.
But to be honest, I still didn't know what I wanted to do, and that was what I call like my big mistake, is that I didn't have a clear end goal. I was like, I want to work in like in conservation, maybe for the government or nonprofit. So I had these animals, I had a house, and I didn't want to move. I wanted to move once and for all, and that was it. So I was applying to permanent jobs. And I was really confident in my job applications and stuff, but I wasn't getting any interviews except for I got one interview for a permanent job. And then I didn't want to apply for postdocs because those are temporary positions. But I did let myself, when it was like really perfect, when there's a postdoc I really liked, and or it wasn't an area I wanted to live forever, I could see myself living.
Gotcha. So the temporary the temporariness of the job kind of helped if you want to live somewhere, and then I'm not going to live there forever. I'll come back or go wherever.
No, that I could. Yeah, so I wanted a job where it was in like a big enough city that I could find another job. So I would take it to the postdoc, but then find a permanent job afterward. But I didn't want to go to like, you know, South Dakota, where the chances for a job that I was interested in would come up. So I knew academic jobs are really competitive, like being a professor, but I had no idea how competitive wildlife jobs were. So this was totally shocking to me that like I was not getting jobs. Right. And I know that sounds funny, but it was. I was like, I have the experience, I have a PhD, like how am I not qualified? But I just slowly realized that just the market is so saturated out there. So I did get a postdoc. I got a long postdoc in Raleigh, North Carolina. It was 5 years. And I was like, so Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill are considered the research triangle. So I was like, okay, over 5 years, I will find a permanent job in the research triangle.
Yep.
Well, guess what? In 5 years, I didn't. No. And it was kind of a couple of things that, well, mostly I was surprised by how few jobs I was qualified for, because what I learned from my first experience is that I got interviews for jobs where my experience really lined up with the job. So I thought getting your PhD would be kind of a blanket where you could, you know, I could easily work for the Nature Conservancy.
Right.
But I had worked in Gabon on forest elephants. So if I was applying for a job in North Carolina working on mammals, like there's not a lot of crossover. So I didn't realize how competitive we're. So I think maybe a decade or so ago, I would have been fine. But now they're going to hire the person who's been working in North Carolina with that mammal experience over somebody with my experience. So just every interview that I had, I would get like so close, but they would be like, oh, there's just somebody with this much more experience. In one case, it was somebody with 10 years of experience. So I was like, oh my gosh, like, I can't. And people were even asking, like, why is this person applying for this job? Like, they're clearly overqualified. But again, the market's just so oversaturated. So I loved my job in Raleigh. I worked at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. I loved that. And at the same time, they really encouraged science communication, and I really loved science communication. So I started blogging with a friend, and then I eventually developed my own blog. And then a couple of things happened at the same time. I realized that I loved science communication, I loved writing, I loved public speaking. I was also blogging about the troubles on the job market, and I knew I wasn't the only one.
Right.
So I started to give advice about this. Just slowly, honestly, I transitioned into doing more blogging and stuff. And then I was listening to podcasts where I eventually found podcasts where people were making money off of doing this. And so I was like, okay, eventually I stopped applying for jobs, and I decided to do this full time.
Yeah.
So I do a combination of science communication and career mentoring and some other stuff like writing books and being on TV and all of the stuff.
It seems like a lot to take on, like a lot of different streams, right? I guess that's what you have your own business. You're able to do that. Now, like, do you miss the research aspect or finding that job? Like, do you ever go back and look and just be like, oh man, I kind of wish I went into this route instead of another route? Or did you feel like you exhausted everything before you went in?
That's a good question. Yeah, yes and no. I would say so. Mostly, I don't miss it. Okay. Because another thing that was going on was I felt like my research was very academic, and I loved it, but I really wanted a conservation application. I loved animals growing up. I wanted to save the world, and when I was doing my research, I thought it was cool, but it was just going into academic journals and like, yeah, maybe somebody could use it for a conservation application, but it was just like an if, maybe if somebody does this. Whereas if I was working on a project that had a direct conservation application, I think I would have enjoyed it more. And also, I could have, applied for jobs all over the country and stuff. But like I said, I really wanted to stay in Raleigh. I was really happy in Raleigh. I do miss like when I talk about science communication, I do miss like the firsthand experience being like, we discovered this or like our group found this out. I miss that part, but I don't miss necessarily like writing the papers. And I miss like being part of a larger lab where we could like share ideas and talk about like what's new in science and stuff like that. But in terms of the research, itself, I don't miss a ton. And I do miss like getting those neat experiences as well, I guess. Yeah. So those are the things that I miss.
Yeah.
But at the same time, also, I was working with kids. My job required to integrate research into classrooms, like real research. So we would have kids set up camera traps, and we would use the images for research. And I was doing a lot of social science research too. And I realized that for people to care about the environment and conservation, it's really important for them to have a connection with nature. So that was also like where things started to pivot for me, that like, oh, science communication is really important because I can, create that connection for kids. Like, I mean, think about like, Steve Irwin, he created that connection for so many people. And so kids, I realized like,
yeah, for sure.
Like even though I never really watched Steve Irwin, but yeah, so I realized like, oh, I can have a bigger impact by getting people to care, and then they carry that throughout their lifetime. Whereas when I was working on forest elephants, yes, I was working on an endangered species, but the problem was not like we weren't studying them enough. The problem was people were poaching them. So like, how do you get the people to stop poaching them? Which ultimately boils down to people caring enough about wildlife, whether it's the politicians, the government, the people buying it, or the gap in knowledge between what people are buying versus what they think they're buying, all of that sort of stuff. It's a person problem at that point.
Yeah, for sure. So like when you first started your business, like that's not an easy thing to start. Did you have like you started talking about the career thing was that your first sort of venture into building the business was, okay, I'm going to offer career advice to people. Was that the first thing?
I Yeah, I think so. So I officially opened an LLC in, I believe it was April of 2020. So this happened right around the pandemic too. So I decided before the pandemic, and it was great timing, because, everything shut down. So I opened it, and then, at the same time, yeah. So like I knew there's several ways to make money through blogging. One is ads.
Yeah.
So at that time, I watched Tiger King like everybody else, and I wrote blog posts about it, and those did really well.
Yeah.
And I was able to sign up with an advertising company that pays better than like Google ads. So I started getting ad revenue. It's still not a ton of money, but I do have ads.
Enough to get money in, at least.
Well, and I was in a lucky situation where I didn't have to worry about money. My ex did have a lucrative job.
Yes.
So I didn't have to make money in the first place, but I did make money with ads. And then, yes, I opened up group programs to add some more income. And then the other way for people to make money is affiliate links too. So I did experiment with some of that, but I never made a ton of money off of that, but I also never really worked at that. It was really, and I was writing my book too. So I do get income from my book. But it's mostly my book and the group programs that do the most. Those are the two most lucrative. And once I started taking students, and then especially when I started seeing the success of my students, that's really what helped out, because at first it was kind of like, oh, here's like, based on my experience, if I wanted this, like, here's what would have done differently. But like, I wasn't 100% sure it would work. I'm like, okay, it should work. But then once I started working with my students and stuff, because my problem wasn't my job applications. I wrote really good job applications. It was, I didn't have the experience. So really applying that on my students and then seeing it work for them, it's like, wow, this really works, and this is awesome. And then it grew from there. But then I did get a divorce, so I did have to provide income for myself. And that is the trickiest part, probably.
Well, yeah, for sure. Like I did the same thing. I started to make money off of like, the podcasting, and I ventured into careers as well. And I had a job at the time, so it, like, I have a wife, so the dual income was nice, and so I didn't have to worry about too much money. But when I didn't have a job, and then all of a sudden, like, this money is going towards paying bills, it's a lot of pressure on yourself, like to I found, for me anyway, to put on yourself once you're like, okay, now I've got to make a go of this. Like, before, if I got a student or I didn't get a student, then it was like, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. But now I need every student that I can. Did you find that was a lot of pressure when you had to pivot in life like that?
Yeah, that can definitely happen to you. And there's kind of like two schools of thought. And I listen to a lot of, not a lot of career mentors, but I have a couple of chosen that I listen to. I listen to a lot of their advice, and different people use different approaches. There's like, Tony Robbins will say kind of like burn your bridges, like, or burn your boats. It's based off of that anecdote where it's like a war. I can't remember the story, but basically it's a war general. They went to an island and they like burned the boats to like, because they were planning to win or something. Like there's no way out. There's no way back.
Yeah.
So like you quit your job, or you just, you make things happen for you. Or the other one is you keep your day job, and the nice thing about that is that you don't have that financial pressure. Then it becomes more of a joy, and you don't have to worry about selling it. So yeah, those are the two main schools of thought. But yeah, sometimes you can get caught up in that, but it's really important, I think, to separate yourself from that as well, and decide what works best for you too. For some people, one method works better than the other to jump all in, whereas the other, like, for them to, and then there's part-time work too that people can get. And I tell my students, like, and I mean, that's the one great thing about being connected to the entrepreneur community, is that it attracts a certain type of people, and I would say that those they're either taught or just are more likely to do this, but to make sacrifices and just willing to like do what it takes. Like I was part of this a group coaching program. It was an expensive program, and somebody sold their car to be a part of it.
Wow.
And yeah, because they really wanted this business for themselves, and so they were just like willing to do what it took. And actually the mentor, she was incredible too. She came from Venezuela. She was a single mom. She was going through a divorce. She had like tons of legal bills and stuff. So like that's what I tell my students too, like for like, I charge for my programs. It's an investment for them and themselves, so that I can give them unbiased advice. And this is, like my career now is to serve them. But I think a lot of times we have our stigma in our head, like, oh, if we do Uber or something like that, that means like we haven't made it. And especially if you're a college graduate, you see your friends move on, like doing, quote unquote, real jobs. And even if you are working wildlife jobs, for me, my temp jobs never lined up. So I would go home, I would work for 6 months, then go home for 6 months and like wait for the next job. And I would live with my parents and, like work at Starbucks and stuff. And my other friends would have jobs, but it's just, we just live in a different world. It's just a different system, and that's totally normal for us.
Well, and it's challenging. It definitely is challenging. The people I see in ocean conservation, they are moving from place to place to place, and they're happy with that, and that's their lifestyle that they chose. But they move from place to place, and it'll be from not only cities, but it'll be in like towns that are far from cities, like country areas that there's not a lot around, and then they'll move to another place because that job was only for 4 to 6 months, and then they'll go to another place, and they'll go to another place. And it's a hard life to lead where you can't put roots down, you can't buy a home, you're going from apartment to apartment, or you're renting a home or Airbnb or whatever that might be. And it's a very challenging place to be in life, unless that's what you choose to do. But if you wanted to start a family, or if you wanted to have any kind of routine, it's very difficult to continue to move like that. So it's very challenging. And there are jobs that are full-time, permanent, like a lot of government jobs and things like that. But a lot of the ones that people go for that are available are these 6-month jobs, and they're usually based on funding. And so like, is that the biggest challenge you find for some of your students? I just kind of want to talk a little bit about that, if that's okay, like with the career stuff. Like, what are the biggest challenges that you find that students have?
That they can't get jobs. That's the biggest one.
Right.
So I do think, and oceans might be different. In my field, I do think it's normal for people to take several jobs before they land their permanent job.
Right.
I was actually, for my latest training, I read this paper about like it's called It Pays to Get Paid in Wildlife Work. And it was all about how the more paid jobs you have, the more likely you're going to end up with a permanent job. And
interesting.
It was like 7 to 9 jobs predicts success. I think that's a lot though, and my students have not had 7 to 9 jobs. Like they've gotten permanent jobs with maybe like 3 to 5 or something around that range.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that's pretty normal. And even like my one friend in graduate school, she got her master's and she couldn't get a job afterwards. She worked at Starbucks for a while. So it's I think like the biggest message I want to tell to people out there who are struggling is it's competitive. It is so saturated. It's not about you. And then talking to employers too, employers are like, it's so hard to choose people because sometimes it's like, this person would be great, but so would this person. So if you're not getting, if you're not getting a job, like you do, I don't want to say you have to try harder, but you have to think about it more strategically. So it's about building up I say it takes clarity, strategy, and application. So it's about first figuring out what you want to do, ultimately want to do, then building up your experience, especially towards that thing. So in the beginning, that might be hard because you have no experience. So you might need to get broader experience. But as you progress, you want to get more and more closer to that. And then also network is part of the strategy. Those are the big ones. And of course your education.
Yeah.
And then job application. I actually think, so most of my students struggle with, they don't get interviews. They apply for jobs and they don't get interviews. And what I've found is most people don't write strong job applications. I think that they write just very basic, regular job applications.
Yep.
And a lot of the information out there about job applications is not for wildlife jobs. So people look at that stuff for like businesses or, like just like the general like LinkedIn stuff where you got to do like bullet points of like a couple of words. Like, no, that doesn't work for our field. So, for a lot of my students, once they improve their job applications and nothing else, then they get jobs.
I find the same thing. I find the biggest thing, the biggest thing, the first step for us is like clarity. Like, you can't just go and I want to protect the ocean, or I want to go into conservation, or I want to go into sharks. Like, you have to have clarity, and then identifying, the job that you want. I'm very, very much the same way in your thought process. It's like, figure out what you want to do and then figure out how to get to that point and what you need, what kind of experience you need. That'll help you start to target the jobs that you want.
Yeah.
And then the application is the biggest thing. It's unreal to see. Some of the application is not the people's fault. It's not the fault of students or early career scientists. It's just they haven't been taught, and they've been taught from somebody who's done business resumes before. And like you said, they're very different. Like when I did government jobs and I applied to government jobs, like my cover letter, if I look at it, sometimes they were like 8 to 9 pages long because you had to answer, for the federal government, for the federal Canadian government, you had to answer all these questions. And if I actually printed it out, it was like 9 pages long, 8 to 9 pages long.
Wow.
With all the, because then you had to hit certain things that they wanted to hear. And, and they wouldn't even look at it if it didn't. But it's interesting because like it took me a while to find the jobs that I wanted. But when somebody actually sat down, and I used to get frustrated, I stopped applying to government jobs. I got so frustrated with it. I was like, they never answer me back. So what's the point? And then I was actually working a contract in a government building for the government that I wanted to, like for the department that I wanted to work for, or one that was like adjacent. And somebody sat me down. It's like, oh, if you want to do this, there's a certain way. Like you have to know the specific way. And I'm like, why don't they teach this? And they do, but they teach it in-house. They don't teach it outside.
Yeah.
And so this is where like people like yourself come in, where it's like you have to know where to apply, how to apply, and how to like take the skills and experience that you have and put it on paper in a way that people are gonna be like, this is helpful. Like I want to see this kind of
thing. Yeah.
So I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I think people don't know how to, like, for lack of a better word, brag about themselves. Like they're like they're very humble. Like they'll say like, oh, educated guests. And it's like, well, can you provide some more details about that? Like, or data analysis. Like they just don't know how to speak. Job applications, like talk. And then I also, and then to go off of that, I don't feel like they know the value that they have too. It's like, like I remember working with this one student. She had like 4 bullet points on her list, and she lived in Borneo for like a year and a half studying orangutans. And I was like, there's no way you did just 4 things. like you were in the field, like living at a field station. At the very least, you were like doing like field camp type stuff where you're like ordering supplies, doing logistics, like with like a million mosquitoes around you or something, or you know what I mean? Like there's more complicated things to this than you're not painting the picture well enough.
Well, it's funny, we laugh at that too, but it's like it's so true. You don't realize how many important things that people look for. Yeah. It's like you can do field work. Everybody can do field work, but how well do you do field work? How well do you prepare for field work? How well do you make sure that like the data is intact and like you've got the right field sheets, and if not field sheets, it's covered. I'm from a water background, so everything has to be covered, or if it's digital, it's got to make sure it's waterproof and all that kind of stuff, right? So there's a lot that goes in it, and that it's you have to learn how to do it. A lot of people just don't know. And some people get a little resistant when they're like, I should know this, or my university should have taught me. Do you ever get students that are like looking for your help, but may not want to like join a group or may not want to pay for that kind of service because they feel
definitely.
like they should do it. How do you deal with that? I'm curious.
So, I mean, I give away a lot of free stuff. I have my podcast, I have free trainings. I just did a free training that used to be a webinar plus a bonus webinar, and I turned it into 3 free trainings. That's like 3, it probably ends up being like more than 3 hours long. So a couple of things. It's impossible for some stuff to train without them enrolling in something. And like especially like I do have resume revamp, which they could take and they could learn and totally redo their resume by themselves. Or even I have a job application academy, but that part does include job application reviews.
Right.
So
you review them.
Yes. Yeah. So some students might be able to take themselves to the next level on their own and they don't need any review. Yep. But I would say most need the personal review and need how to like break down the job posting, because it's not just about you. It's really about dissecting the job posting. And I become very good at that. Like interpreting like, oh, this is what they want. This is what they think is most important. And then matching your stuff to that stuff. But I think the biggest thing is that there's a shift that happens when you invest in yourself. You take it much more seriously. So it actually honestly is a benefit to them because they value it so much more. And like going back to that coaching program I was a part of, it was expensive. And I made sure I showed up every single week because I did not want to waste my money. So I was there, and she changed the program around too. So towards the end, it was just me and one other person who were in the program, and I would be at the meetings every single week. And she'd be like, "Okay, what do you like?" Just to troubleshoot problems. She's like, "What are your problems this week?" And I'm like, "I don't really have any problems. I'm just here to like absorb more information and get inspired." And then like I would talk to her and I realized I did have more problems that we could talk about. So you show up differently. And you take it more seriously. You put in the work. I've done scholarships for my program, and some people do take it really seriously. Like I've had Chitra, I gave her a scholarship in Nepal, and she is actually now in Illinois. It's amazing. She wanted to. Her dream was to get a master's in the United States. Yep. And she did it. You know, she took my program. We worked on her cover letters and everything. But she also put in the work ahead of time too. Right. I do have people fill out applications, but she started in Nepal, like attending she loved turtles. She attended a free, I think, turtle webinar or herp conservation talk. And afterwards she contacted the scientist and she's like, how can I help? Like, I want to get involved. So she had that drive. Like she wasn't letting anything about her situation hold her back. Yeah. And she didn't have the money being with her circumstances, but she filled out a good job or a good application for the scholarship, and she showed up to the calls and she took my advice. Whereas other people before I did the application and stuff, I would gift it to people and do scholarships, and some people would never show up at all, and I had to be like, hey, what's going on? Yeah. But they would tell me they really wanted it and stuff. So there is a certain click or a change that happens when you invest in yourself.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think that would, I agree. I've done a couple of coaching programs before. And every time, like if I did a free one, I wouldn't be as invested. If I had to pay, you're like, I just put down a boatload of money. I need to actually make sure I get the most out of this as possible so that I can get back. In fact, sometimes I look at it and I'm like, how much more money can I make if I'm putting, sometimes it's $100, sometimes it's $500, sometimes it's $1,000. And you're like, how much money am I going to make off of this? Like that's how I look at it and say, okay, this is what I got to shoot for. So I got to make sure I get this done.
I just joined a program for fitness or for weight loss. And I since I've been moved to the Chicago area, I slowly gained like 12 pounds. And I have been trying
that deep
to
dish
lose.
pizza. That's what it is. That's the problem.
No, I don't eat that.
I know.
I blame my boyfriend. I'm like, I'm too happy like being with you. So I gained this weight, and I've been trying, like really consciously trying to lose it. Like, and I know how to lose weight. I've done it before. What's always worked for me is personal trainers. So, but like I've calorie counted by myself and all this stuff. But when it hasn't been working. So I'm like, okay, I'm fed up of figuring this out myself. Right. So I joined a program. And then it's also nice because like, it's kind of like the responsibility is taken off of you. Like I still put in the work, but it's like, okay, you tell me what to do. And if it doesn't work, it's your fault. So, they tell me what to do, but because I invested money and then also I have someone to report to, it's
that accountability, right?
Yeah. So I found out I was counting calories, but I was using heaping scoops, and like now
it makes a difference. It makes a difference.
Oh my gosh! Well, now I have to weigh stuff and weighing stuff. It's like you can't cheat with that.
No.
But yeah, it works. Like I've lost the 12 pounds. I can't believe it. It's been amazing, and so yeah. And I remember like the first few days, I'm like, crap, I can't like lie to myself because they're going to be like, what's going on, Stephanie? How come you're not losing weight? And I can't be like, oh, well, your program's not working because, I'm the one who's not doing it. So yeah, it's that accountability and then also, taking the weight off of your shoulders so you don't have to do it alone anymore. Like you get to talk in my group mentoring program, you get to talk to me. Right now it's small enough that I'm able to answer every question. So even though it's group mentoring, we do training. So there's recordings that people watch, and then we have group mentoring for whatever questions people have, or if they want me to review things. But yeah, it's small enough that I'm able to get to every question. I get to know the people. And yeah, it's been great. Awesome. I've loved working with them, and then also just like I don't know how it's been for you, but I've felt like it's very common. I mean, there's definitely exceptions to the rule, but it's very common in the science world for people to be negative and hard on you. And honestly, sometimes abusive. I've never really been abused, but I know situations where people have been like taken advantage of, like you're supposed to work 20-hour days, and just like in academia, like you just never feel good enough and smart enough and stuff like that. So I really want to do this to give back, because I was never the smartest. I was never the best at science, but I was really dedicated and passionate. And that's how I got through my PhD. Like you don't need to be the smartest at all. Right. It's kind of like about being stubborn. Like you just want to like make it happen. Yeah.
Hey, I had a high school teacher who told me that I did not belong in science. And he was my physics teacher. And I said, screw you. I am going to. Good for you. Yeah, that's kind of been my driving factor, like in university. Every time there was a difficult part, I was like, no, I'm going to continue.
Yeah, and some people probably carry that with them the whole life and let them like not be in science. So I like to be that positive force and support for people that I truly believe anyone can do it as long as they want it. And again, you have to be willing to put in the work. You can't just like sign up for my program and you'll get a job. You have to put in the work. But if you're stubborn enough too, that's like there are competitive jobs. If you ocean jobs, like if you want to be a marine biologist, that's a super competitive job.
Yeah. Very competitive.
If you want to work with whales and dolphins and stuff. But I think if you're stubborn enough and you work at it hard long enough with the right strategy and doing things with intention, building your network, it can happen for you, or will happen for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So how often do you run these groups? Is it done all throughout the year? Is it like an ongoing group, or is it or do you do it, you open it up for like a small group and then you close it and then open it up for another small group?
Good question. I've changed it a lot. And I've decided on I recently decided on one strategy. So I have a couple of different levels. My favorite and the best level is a successful wildlife professional that is my group mentoring program. So it used to be a year long. Now it's 4 months worth of content.
Okay.
You get to keep it forever though, so you can pace it however you want. But it's technically you watch like an hour-long training per week and do exercises, and then every other week we have group mentoring. But I'm thinking about changing that to weekly, where you can ask whatever you want. I did have open enrollment before, then I switched to cohorts. Now I'm doing kind of both, where people have to sign up for the training to get in, and then it's open for a short period of time. And then I run the trainings throughout the year. So right now I'm doing the trainings like every 6 weeks.
Nice.
But it depends on how full the group gets, I think, how often I'll do the trainings. But I would say at least 3 times a year I would have the trainings. And then I have the Job Application Academy. So this is for people who know what they want to do. Like they have the clarity, they have the experience, but they're just like struggling on the job applications. And I teach them, it's all the same stuff from the Successful Wildlife Professional, but just the job application stuff. And then we do reviews once a month just on job applications. And then I have like master classes where it's just recordings and you can do it on your own.
Okay, interesting. That's really interesting. So that's one side. We just got into the one side of your business, and that looks really great. And we'll put some links in so people can check out some more information on those if they're interested. Also, you do it like a science communication. So this is not the only thing you do. You do a little bit of science communication. Mm-hmm. Now, I know you and I have discussed your TV escapades quite a bit, going on TV and doing some stuff for the History Channel. How did that all come about?
I started out on TV first through somebody I knew, my boss at the museum. I think he got on a TV show from somebody he knew too as well, Rob Nelson. Rob, okay. You'd actually you should interview Rob. He does. I mean, he's not exclusive to oceans by any means, but I think he's done some ocean work. But he was a scientist and then he transitioned to communicator. But he does like film. That's his big thing.
Oh, interesting.
Now he's really successful on YouTube now. He changed a little bit. He still does science communication, but he changed his name to Stone Age Man and kind of does some like.
I love that name.
Yeah, you'd like him. But he makes a lot of videos and stuff. Anyway, so he got us on the Science Channel's show What on Earth. And so then I just did that show for several years, and then independently I got invited to do a show on the History Channel called The Proof Is Out There. And that I got through my YouTube channel because I was just creating content. And at the time I did a lot of camera trap work, and people, I would, visit a lot of places too, giving talks, and people would always tell me that they saw a mountain lion or a black panther. And in North Carolina, we used to have mountain lions, but now they're extinct there. And there are no black panthers in the United States. So I did a video about that. And slowly but surely over time, that blew up. And that's probably my most successful video. And the people from the History Channel, just somebody found my video and they were like, I really like how you explain things, how you, you didn't like, I didn't, although a lot of the commenters probably disagree. I didn't like immediately poo-poo them and be like, no, they don't exist. Like I went through like with the evidence that like why we haven't found any evidence of them. So now I'm on this TV show, where I evaluate stuff. So a lot of times it's like Bigfoot videos or just like weird videos, but there's also a lot of like just weird things happening in nature too that are not
that people want explained, right?
Not well explained, or just some animals doing weird things. So I comment on those things. And then I've just been doing a couple of extra shows here and there, mostly through that connection, because people from the History, that's on the History Channel. So people got to know me, and so they call me in to do some extra shows here and there.
I love it. And like, how often do you spend on that?
Oh, good question. It's usually happens maybe 3 or 4 times a year.
Okay.
And I I kind of crunch before the assignment. I hope they're not listening. I don't. I mean, I think part of the reason why I do that is because so the stories and stuff will be really fresh in my head, and the information will be fresh in my head because they give you, they give you the videos and stuff to review on, and you talk it over with them, and you talk about like the different angles that will take. So for instance, if it's a Bigfoot video, they would, they'll be like, okay, like what other animals live in the area could it be? And like, why couldn't it be that? So sometimes, there's things I might have to research or look up, okay, like there's this one video with a snake. I still don't know how it happened, but it got like this algae growing on it. So it looked like it looked like a hairy green snake, like kind of like a Muppet. And it was a real snake. So like, talking about like how I know it's a snake. And then, some things I might have to look up, like how does algae grow on a snake, or how would things happen? But yeah, so I just like study the week and prepare the week before, usually like a couple of hours every day. And then it's a full day of filming.
That's amazing. And like when you're done, like, I mean, when you do a full day of filming like that, you get pretty tired after a while. You're talking all day, you're going through takes and multiple takes and multiple takes. You must be exhausted. So it's probably good that it's only like 3 or 4 times a year where you're just like, all right, that's good. I got it out of my system. Yeah. What have you learned the most from doing TV work with science communication, like traditional TV work?
That's a good question. Maybe that people love Bigfoot. But here's my like fake funny answer. But I think my fake funny answer is that people take cryptids really seriously. I had no idea. I didn't even know cryptid was a word. Like,
right.
There's societies, there's conferences, like they take it very, very seriously. I think in terms of, this is hard. Maybe, I mean, obviously like sensational stuff is interesting. Like what, I mean, I think people are always interested in like the unknown and like what's left to be discovered and the intriguing. And, I mean, I think so many people probably like Bigfoot and stories like that too, is because they know somebody who's had an experience. That's another thing, is like making it relatable. But I mean, sometimes I guess like also like what people don't know and what people find interesting. And this kind of goes back to being a scientist. Like when I first became a scientist, or even into my science career, I felt like I was a terrible scientist because in school I was so well at like studying. Like I would just memorize for a test, and I liked it too. I wasn't just like cramming for the test, but I was good at studying. And then as a science is all about figuring out answers to questions that people don't know. So I had to come up with questions, and I just like assumed so much stuff was known because that's what I was taught in school. Like, here's all the stuff we know. Yeah. So I think just that there's so much stuff out there that we don't know still. Like even they had me do this one video about these worms like forming piles, and it was like after a storm, and like they were like in the middle of the road, and they were talking about like why would they be in the middle, and it's like I don't know, I just assumed like people would know the answer to this, but like people don't. I looked it up and like there's these different speculations, and then also that people would find that interesting too. Like, oh, I guess people are interested in like how the world works and and strange phenomena and stuff like that. And you don't have to, it doesn't have to be fake. Like, sorry, Bigfoot's not real, guys, but it doesn't, there's lots of really cool stuff out there that we don't know that's real. So,
I think one of the best things that I've ever learned was talk to people who are not involved in science. And maybe not conspiracy theorists like the Bigfoot people, but also like, take somebody on a hike, or take somebody, into like a river area or a lake area or an ocean area for me, or even anywhere, and then listen to the questions that they have. Yeah. And sometimes they're like the simplest questions, but they are interesting. You'll be like, oh, actually that was a really good question. And I think oftentimes as biologists, we often overthink, and we're like, what can we give that's super exciting and that'll like go over the top, like for TV or something like that.
Yes.
And I did a TV show as well, and it was about evolution, and some of the little things, like just the function. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, oh, okay. Like people really want to know about that. Okay, I can do that. And I think when you hear people or even kids ask questions, because then you're just like,
yes,
okay, this is like the top of the curiosity chain is when you get to talk to kids. And as you know, when you worked with kids and continue, and you're like, okay, now these are questions that people really want to know. It's almost like, you have that TV show Smarter Than a Fifth Grader. It's almost like, can you ask a question like a fifth grader? Because that would be something I think that would be really interesting to hear. Like, can you answer a question from a fifth grader or something like that? Because they always have great questions, I find, young kids. So, but that's interesting. And now, so growing the business, like in terms of science communication, the TV's one aspect. Do you ever get to work with organizations on their science communication? Have they ever reached out? Because you do podcasting, you do videos, you do TV. Do you ever provide advice for some like organizations or other science communicators themselves?
I have, like, during my postdoc, I would be part of like panels and things like that. But since then, not really. I've just more focused on my own business. And honestly, I've been focusing on getting the career mentoring thing. So that might be part of the reason why is I've been really focusing on getting the career mentoring, because I've had to learn so much and not only creating the programs, but also, like wondering which structure of the programs works well, obviously creating the content and then selling. Like, I never thought I would be selling. So, and science communication is actually kind of selling too. It's the same principle. So I've had to learn so much with that stuff. And now I finally feel like I'm kind of not finished with it, but at a good place where I can take a back seat. And then next year, I really want to focus on science communication again. And also, I did do this kids program, and I want to revisit that and do that again, but change it. I started out initially more like a teaching kids about like the process of science and stuff. And then was it last year? Yeah, last year I worked with a coach, and he helped me transform it into kind of like a parenting course where because he felt that like nature and science wouldn't sell on its own. He felt like parents aren't really looking to get their kids involved in science. Like, that's not like a strong need, but parents like fear losing connection with their kids. So like we framed it as like, to create the best connection and long-lasting connection with your child, like work with them outside on these collaborative projects in nature, which I totally agree with and believe in. But I felt like it kind of took a parenting twist, and I want to put it back more to be just about like getting kids outside in nature and getting them connected and getting them curious. So less of a focus on parenting. So I want to be doing more of that again next year, and figuring out how I want to run that. And
love it.
So if your audience members have ideas for like what kinds of things they'd want to see, but I don't know, I'm thinking about some sort of membership where like I provide an activity for them to do outside, and we have like a community where they can share and contribute to community science or something like that.
Yeah. Get him like be a part of something bigger maybe, or something, a part of a project, like an ongoing project that multiple people can contribute to. I like that. I like that idea. That's kind of cool. I think the more you can do with young children, the better, right? So they can get that hands-on experience, especially with parents and stuff. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, we're kind of coming to the end here, and you and I can talk forever. I know. We do that all the time. We didn't even get into the podcast. So Fantasy Scientist is the podcast that you have now. It's on YouTube as well, but it's on any favorite podcast app that people can get, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And what can people get from the podcast? Like, what would they expect to hear from the podcast?
It all centers around the idea of really wildlife. So that's what I've always felt like I've been about, like my connection to animals and connection to nature. So I talk about my experiences as a researcher. I talk about careers. I mean, that's something I've been talking about a lot, careers. Yeah. I interview guests. So I interview guests with all different types of careers, all different types of backgrounds, basically, I mean, related to our field. So some people, like I've talked to people who have worked in the climate change sector of corporations. or anything related to lifestyle as well, that relates even indirectly to wildlife. So I'm also like super interested in health and just even being like a more conscious consumer and stuff like that, or diet as well, like how your diet impacts wildlife. So there's a huge variety of things. I'm also really big on mindset as well. So sometimes I have episodes about mindset because, as I mentioned before, this career, and the people can be kind of negative, and then also just the nature of what we're dealing with loss. It can get depressing. Absolutely. So, and then I don't know, I'm just really interested in like productivity and efficiency and things like that. So just like making yourself a better biologist or like whatever career trajectory you're going towards. So it's a mishmash of things, but it centers around wildlife and the environment.
This is what I love about podcasting is everybody can the host makes it what it is, and it's based on your interests, and it kind of feeds it and what you think is needed within sort of the field. And I think that's really important. And I know a lot of your audience connects on that too. So
it's kind of like whatever I want to talk about.
Well, that's the thing. It's the same with mine. It's whatever I want to talk about. But we get to talk about it. That's the fun part, right? Now, one question, like, what would you like as from the experience that you have from building a business and being sort of in the wildlife career itself? What advice would you give like my listeners here if, not only are they listening to start a career, but maybe talking about doing a little bit of a job, like or working as like in like making like building their own business,
like a side hustle,
to be in there. Yeah. Like what would the recommendation be, or the best thing you can give if you had to give one piece of advice? What would you do? What would you say?
Oh my God, one piece of advice. Well, first let me say that even before I became an entrepreneur, when I was a scientist, I was like, oh my gosh, my job is so much like being a business owner, like my dad's. Because when you're a scientist, especially like I was never a principal investigator, but being a postdoc, it kind of felt like that because I was, at times like writing my own grants and trying to fund my own projects. But I got to see, the people I was working with, and they were the principal investigators, and like their science is kind of like a business. Like they have to fund their projects, hire employees, which are either graduate students or field assistants, to run those projects, and then the output, like the like profit, is like the publication. Yeah. So it's just like a different elements, but the same type of system. And that's what my dad would do. He'd get customers and like to make money. And so it was very similar. And also, you're probably laughing when I was talking about my dad, because I never went home and felt like I was off. Like I could always be like, at the time I was applying for jobs, but I could always be, writing more papers, doing more data analysis, like coming up with this new idea, setting up this project. Like there was always so many things to do.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest, I'm going to give two parts. I'm going to cheat and give two answers. But the biggest part, I think, is first to know that it is really possible for you in this day and age. Like it is so cool what people sell online. So I think my biggest piece of advice is to follow people who are doing what you want, like follow digital entrepreneurs who are doing this type of stuff. And there's so many free podcasts out there, so many free resources to help you. One of the people I follow is James Wedmore. He's the biggest one I follow. And that there's so much opportunity out there. Like he had somebody on his podcast who taught people how to hike, and he was like joking. He's like, okay, like how are you making money off this? You're just telling people like put one foot in front of the other, and he was being a jerk, but on purpose to be silly, but But this woman, she started a business teaching people how to hike. People wanted to do backpack hiking. They didn't know how to do it. So she made a course. Here's how you do it. And here's how to be safe. Here are the things you need to think about. And she made money doing it. So just start out James will teach you way better than I will, but he has so many free resources. Just start out thinking about what are you, you don't even have to be like a full blown expert, but like, what do you know more about than somebody else?
Than most people.
That you could start teaching them. And it's as simple as I started mine with a post saying I'm thinking about starting a course teaching you how to get a career in wildlife. Like if you're interested, drop an emoji and I'll send you like the link with more information. And it's as simple as that. And if you don't want to charge people in the beginning, if you just want to like help people to get some ideas, you can do that. You can charge them. You don't have to charge them a lot. You can charge them $50 or something.
Right.
And just get that experience of working with people. And you just don't know, again, like what you can sell. Like people are just looking for help. And yeah, you can probably go online and learn how to hike, but you have to sort through all the noise and everything, when it's like so much nicer to just sign up for a program and watch trainings and know that you know how to do it. And then if you have like a group mentoring program, you can ask this person questions. So yeah, if you love birds, if you love fish, if you love plants, like can you teach a plant identification course or a bird, bird people are crazy in a good way. They love their birds. Yeah, can you teach an audio course? Like here's how to learn bird songs. I'll teach you the top 10 bird songs. And again, they can do it online, but if you can teach them in a way that makes it faster and easier for them, then you have some people.
Even like an audio catalog, like you bring it as a podcast, or you can like put it as a list or something like that and hear the birds. It'd be that's a really good idea.
I so demand many ideas 10% royalties whoever does that.
This has been great, Stephanie. This has been awesome. You and I were good friends, and we've become great friends over like talking about podcasting. So I'm going to put links to your website, to the podcast, and everything, so people can get access to the YouTube channel, so people can get more access to you and connect with you. And just I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
This was so fun.
Yeah, it's been so much fun to have you on. We'll definitely have you back on sooner than later to talk more about science communication and everything. But really appreciate you coming on, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, for joining us here on the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. It was great to have you on. What's funny is before we did the interview, I was like, hey, when was the last time you were on? She was like, I don't think I've ever been on. And I was like, yes, right. And she goes, when was the last time you were on my podcast? I'm like, I think I did it. But she's like, no, I don't think you did. And we haven't gone on each other's podcast and been able to speak about what we do, but we are doing that now. So you can check out the Fancy Scientist podcast with me on it soon. We're still about to record that next week, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And you should check that podcast out. But also just like what information, great information that she let us have here on this episode. Like it was great. It's been a while since we've talked podcasting, and not only podcasting, but conservation careers. And a lot of times it's me talking about it. It's great to see somebody else having a very similar position, but also a little bit different in their approach. And I really like the approach she takes. I think it's really great. So if you want to take one of her courses, please feel free to do so. You can go over to her website, which the link is in the show notes below, or if you're watching this on YouTube, it's in the description, and you can just click on that and go over there and find out more about Stephanie. But that's it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for joining me today with Stephanie. I want to thank Stephanie for joining us and taking time out of her busy time building her business and being able to share those great knowledge bombs with us today. So thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.